In 325 CE, nearly 300 years after the death of Jesus, the newly Christian Emperor Constantine called an ecumenical council to finally resolve the question of who Jesus was, precisely, and to clarify Jesus' relationship with God the Father. Because while Jesus was here on earth performing miracles, teaching in parables, and getting himself killed, he apparently never made these things clear to his disciples. Indeed, early Christianity was anything but unified on such questions. By 325, there were still three main concepts of Jesus in serious and widespread contention. The first is what we know today as Trinitarianism. Jesus is fully God, co-eternal with the Father and the Spirit. The second concept was hierarchical, where God the Father was above the Son, and then the Son was above the Spirit. Finally, there was modalism, where God is one person who takes on different roles at different times. When God was in Jesus mode, he was clearly cross-dressing. You're welcome. It is from this council in Nicaea that we get the oxymoronically named Nicene Creed, which makes a clear and affirmative statement about who Jesus is. He is begotten, not made, and is consubstantial with the Father. But the council also declared anathemas to indicate that the other teachings regarding Jesus, who he was and what his relationship to the Father was, were heretical and outside Christian orthodoxy. Of course, additional councils were needed to smooth things over and firm things up, but eventually there were splits and schisms, and over time we ended up with exactly what these councils were meant to crush: diversity of opinion and a zillion different Christian sects. You can't be a ruthless totalitarian ideology, though, if people are free to think for themselves, right? Think about that for a minute. Why couldn't Christians just let anyone and everyone believe whatever they wanted to believe about Jesus? Why did the church make you choose between your beliefs and your life? Well, control and power are the obvious answers. But there's another obvious reason as well: hell. Somewhere along the line, it wasn't enough to simply believe in Jesus. You had to believe the exact right thing about Jesus to be kept from burning forever in hell. You see, God's not very good at looking into our hearts and understanding our intentions, or giving us the benefit of the doubt. And that should be a surprise to absolutely no one. The Christian plan of salvation, aside from being obviously ridiculous, has always been rigidly unforgiving and unkind. In Agata Divina, Adam and Eve were told not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which means they didn't even have an understanding of good and evil yet when they ate from that bloody tree, pun intended. Regardless, they were punished severely, along with the whole of humanity. But Adam and Eve were grown-ups, right? Who had admittedly just fallen off the turnip truck. One can imagine, though, that God would be far more understanding and forgiving of children or maybe teenagers who were, for instance, mocking the baldness of God's prophet. You might think so, but you would be wrong. In 2 Kings chapter 2, 42 children were mauled by bears after the prophet Elijah cursed the kids for mocking him and his chrome dome. Very sensitive guy. #thin skin. Which is exactly what the bears were thinking of the kids. How about someone who is perfect and upright? Someone who feared God and turned away from evil? Surely God would be kind, understanding, and forgiving to that person should they falter in a difficult moment, right? Well, you don't even have to wait for them to falter. Job was just minding his own business, being a very good boy, when God made a bet with the devil and turned Job's life into an absolute shitstorm, just to see if he'd crumble and curse God. That God guy who's all-knowing. But God has to have some fealty to his own kin, right? He wouldn't treat his own child so harshly, would he? Well, it turns out that no one had it worse than God's own son. Despite God's ability to simply forgive, he demanded a blood sacrifice, human blood, from his own child, who somehow suffered the agony of 100 billion eternities worth of Dad's wrath in a single afternoon. Impressive, however horrific. When you're dealing with someone so pitiless, someone so unkind, unjust, demanding, and unreasonable, who has no regard for how you live your life or the good you do, but rather is interested only in what you believe, then you had better believe the exact right thing, especially when being tortured for all eternity is the price you'll pay for getting things wrong. Right, Jesus? Once again, I'm me. Thanks for watching.